1880s to about 1903, 1904, there was a great American settler movement. All up and down in Alberta, many communities came up, and the settlers came up from states, and the federal government at the time was worried that they would absorb the Northwest Territories into the United States. It's a lot easier to absorb a territory than it is a province. So that was one of the main reasons why Alberta and Saskatchewan were made provinces, was to put a buffer between the United States and the Northwest Territories. How many people here know the little blip on the map called USONA? I live 6 miles from there. Okay, I got a couple of people in the room. Do you know what it stands for? United States of North America. That town, right now, it's not even a town. It's a spit on the map. I think there's 8 people live in the town site. But in the 1880s, it was over 500 people lived there. The town of Rimbey. How many people here know Rimbey? Yep. Okay. Do you know what its original name was? Kansas Ridge. The city of Airdrie. Its original name was Yankee Valley. And all throughout Alberta and Saskatchewan, you'll find towns like that. And one of the big reasons that they made Alberta and Saskatchewan was because they did not want to lose the territories to the U.S. In 1904, the then Minister of the Interior, Sir Clifford Sifton, quoted, "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairie shall go to enrich our people to the east, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way to our prosperity." Now, not only was Sir Clifford Sifton the Minister of the Interior, he was one of the main authors of the Alberta and Saskatchewan Acts. So, on September 1st of 1905, the Alberta Act came into being. That made Alberta a province. Now, how many people in here have actually had a chance to read the Alberta Act? I would encourage everybody to go read that. You can download a copy of it. It's only a few pages long off of the Alberta government website. It will open up your eyes tremendously, because in there, it gave Alberta and Saskatchewan, under the Saskatchewan Act, the title of province. But it gave us the rights and responsibilities of a territory. So coming into Confederation, we never even were treated as equals to other provinces. We are also the only 2 provinces that were brought into Confederation via an act of legislation rather than via negotiations. Every other province negotiated their way into Confederation. Alberta and Saskatchewan were made by an act of Parliament. So in 1913, the federal government passed the Railway Act Amendment. Now, what did the Railway Act Amendment do? Well, it made it so that it was illegal for a regional railway to cross provincial lines. So that means if you were shipping, let's say, grain from Stettler to Thunder Bay, when the Alberta Central Railway hit the Saskatchewan border, they would not only would have to get rid of their engine and the length, but they would have to offload the grain out of their cars, because even their cars couldn't cross provincial boundaries. So they would do that at the Saskatchewan border, then they'd have to do it again at the Manitoba border, then at the Ontario border. And this eventually put all the regional railways in the West out of business, because you know what? They made an exemption for eastern railways. In 1930, the Natural Resources Transfer Agreement was written, and what that did is it actually transferred the resources from federal control to provincial control. And the only thing is they said at the time that Alberta and Saskatchewan were exempt from it. So all the other provinces got their resources transferred back to them, but except for Alberta and Saskatchewan. In 1931, the House of Lords, in conjunction with the King and the royal decree, put out on December 11th, the Statute of Westminster. Now, there's a lot of people that have some misunderstanding about the Statute of Westminster, but the one thing that it did do is it gave sovereignty over land and resources to the people in care of the provinces, not in care of the federal government. That means that there is no federal land, technically, in this province. The federal parks are not lawful. And if we were to enforce the Statute of Westminster almost 100 years later, we would never have had Jasper happen. And right now we are over 10% of the provinces, of the province, are under federal control. We are the largest national park province in Canada, percentage-wise. Do you know how much Saskatchewan has? I mean, not Saskatchewan, Quebec has? 0.001% that is national parks. Whereas we are over almost 11%. We've got Wood Buffalo, we've got Banff, Jasper, Elk Island, Glacier. You add them all together and it comes up to 11% of our province is held by the federal government. In 1935, now farmers in here that will remember, the voluntary originally, Canada Wheat Board. In 1935 it was brought in as a voluntary marketing board, but by 1943 it was made mandatory for Western Canadian farmers to use the wheat board. Now what does that mean? Okay, if I live in Ontario and I want to sell my grain south of the line, I would pull up to my bin, load my truck, and drive across and sell it to the Americans. If I lived Manitoba westward, I wanted to sell it to the States, I would go to my bin, load up my truck, pull into the local elevator, offload it on one side, and pull around the other side and buy it back from the wheat board at a profit, and then I could take it to the States. Now this stayed in effect until 2012, and the reason that we finally got rid of it was because we had approximately 12 patriots, 6 and 6 from Alberta and Saskatchewan, that decided it was worth going to jail for, and they ran the border with their grain. And they spent from 6 months to a year in jail each to do it, and it created enough of a hoopla here on the prairies that it was finally revoked, and we got rid of the Canada Wheat Board. 1947 to 1950, we had federal control of oil pricing and pipelines. So we had just discovered oil in Alberta, and what was the first thing the federal government says? We'll tell you what you can be paid for it, and we'll tell you if you can put a pipeline in the ground. So finally that got repealed in 1950, and later on you'll see they weren't finished with us on that front. Exactly. 1965. How many in here are old enough to remember the Great Flag Debate? Well, it was a big deal at the time, and I'll go into the details, but by the time I started school in the early 70s, it had already been memory hold. I didn't know anything about it until later on when I was researching. But what happened is in 1965, they decided to make a national flag. And Pearson, who was then Prime Minister, decided that he wanted the sugar maple leaf. Diefenbaker stood up in the House and said that it should be the Manitoba maple, as the Manitoba maple is found from coast to coast, but the sugar maple is only found in the East. Pearson forced closure on the bill and shut off debate on it. And when it went to vote, not a single Western Canadian voted for the maple leaf. And in 1967, 2 years later, during the centennial of Canada, many, many towns and counties within Western Canada refused to fly the Maple Leaf. They flew the red ensign instead, which is still technically an official flag. Most people do not realize that Canada still technically has two official flags. The Canadian Maple Leaf and the red ensign. The red ensign was never gotten rid of. In fact, our military, some branches of the military still fly the red ensign. In 1973 to 1974, the oil, I gotta put my glasses on now. The oil export taxation policies and Alberta oil profits were capped. So what that meant is we were told what we could sell once again, what we sell our oil at. We were told that if we shipped out too much, they would put an excise tax on it, an export tax, and any profits that we made over a certain amount went directly to the federal government. So our then Premier, Leighton, fought for that for a year and finally got it repealed, but it really, everybody said, well, there was an oil shortage in the 70s. No, if you were an oil company and you were told that if you made over a certain amount of money from oil, it was going straight to the federal government, would you even want to take it out of the ground? So it was finally repealed in 74, but just 6 years later, they came up with the National Energy Program, which was everything that was in the 73 to 74 plus. They now told us what we could sell. We had to give priority to oil sales to the east, and they told us what we were selling it to them at. Now that stayed in effect from 1980 until 1988, and everybody thinks, yeah, when the Conservatives came in, they got rid of it. They didn't get rid of it because Brian Mulroney did not get rid of it because he was magnanimous towards the West. He got rid of it because oil prices dropped so low that it cost more to maintain the program than they were getting back out of it. So it wasn't cost effective. That's the only reason that the National Energy Program was ever repealed. In the 1980s and the 1990s, we had, first off in 82, we had the Constitutional Act, and others will talk about that in other speeches, but that was basically bringing it home and basically watering our Constitution down. Then you had the two Quebec referendums, which we can thank Quebec for because that made what we're doing now possible. But then in 2012, under another Conservative government, so my point with pointing out the Conservative government is to show that it doesn't matter who's in power. The West never gets a fair shake. So in 2012, Bill C-38, the Jobs, Growth and Prosperity Act, gave Ottawa control over Alberta's projects. That meant under that act, in which we are still technically under, because last fall when the Premier wrote the MOU with Mark Carney, would have got rid of the next three things. But within a week, the House of Commons held a vote and voted to ignore the MOU. So under that act, we couldn't technically put a highway in this province without Ottawa's permission. And it targeted Alberta specifically. Now, way back in 1980, when they brought in the National Energy Program, the then Prime Minister, the first Trudeau, said that we need to bring this in to ensure that Alberta does not become the economic engine of Canada. And they have been trying ever since, well, even before that, to make sure that that didn't happen. They're failing at it, but they're doing everything they can to make sure of that. In 2016, they brought in the federal carbon pricing, which then again hit our oil. Then in 2018, they brought in I gotta put my glasses on here. They brought in Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines, and Bill C-48, the tanker ban off the West Coast. And we are still under those now. Under the MOU, they would have been repealed. But as I was saying earlier, for those there, Parliament decided that they weren't going to allow that to happen. And now that brings us to modern day. We've got Bill C-8, which is sitting at its second reading, and Bill C-8 is the internet, they call it nicer words, but it's the internet censorship law. What that one will do if it makes final reading and goes through the Senate, is it will make it so that without any court case, they can remove you from the internet entirely. Not just take away your provider, wipe you off the internet. And as you know, most of our stuff anymore has some ties to the internet. So if they bring in Bill C-8, that is scary. But you add that in with Bill C-9, which is the hate speech law, which is now on its first reading in the Senate, which makes it so that what we're doing tonight could become a hate speech. If somebody complains, they can charge us with hate speech. There's a lot of talk about the religious aspects of it, which are very important, but it's going to affect every piece of your life. And it's on the first reading in the Senate. It's already passed the House. So we need to, in order that Alberta stays free, we need to make sure that come this fall, we make sure that we become an independent nation.
Yes.
So, thank you very much. And our next speaker is Mr. Leighton Gray. Most of you know who Leighton Gray is in the area. But if you don't, he's a big advocate for constitutional rights and the like. And I don't want to flatter him too much.
Oh, go ahead.
But without further ado, here's Mr. Leighton Gray.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate that. It's great to be in St. Paul. I lived here a long time ago, and have some great memories here. I met my wife here. My father-in-law is here. You probably remember him as the owner of the last ever Beaver lumber store in your community. Jack Locke, he's here. My brother is here, Lindsay, and my law partner, Brad. I met, I see some familiar faces. A couple of guys that played hockey for me when I coached the St. Paul Canadiens. So yeah, great to be here, and thanks to everyone for coming. Just, I guess, on the eve of Easter, as we get into Easter weekend. Shane, you were remiss in not providing a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to do it for you.
No, it wasn't.
You see where I'm going. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. That's Psalm 24.
Amen.
Amen.
So that's the land acknowledgement I think we can all sign on to. So I'm going to talk to you about a controversial topic that you might have seen some of the speeches I gave. I understand I heard tonight that the one I gave in Smoky Lake has gotten like 1 million views. Literally 1 million views. I'm not saying that to boast, it just means that like I talk about controversial stuff. Sometimes my mouth moves faster than my brain. But I want to talk to you about this Indigenous, Aboriginal, Native, whatever name you want, First Nation. By the way, First Nation, I want to talk about this. You know, I'm an Indian. I can show you the card. In fact, I'll pull it out here. Okay? I'm an Indian. I'm an Indian. Status Indian under the Indian Act. Did you know there's an Indian Act?
Yes.
Yeah. The oldest statute in Canada, 1876. It basically sets up a system of apartheid in Canada.
No, it's face it.
Okay? Well, so because what it does is it creates a separate class of human being called the Indian. And you know, so and now the government of Canada in its wisdom and in its grace and benevolence towards the Aboriginal peoples of Canada calls them First Nations. So let's talk about this now. I think it might be a better title to call us Last Nations. And here's why. Last in life expectancy. We have the lowest life expectancy. Last in household income. Last in education. Last in government transparency. But there are some areas where we're first. Here's a few. First in alcohol and drug abuse. First in prison population by percentage. First in homelessness. First in domestic abuse. First in abortion. First in suicide. First in fatherless homes. First in violent crime. First in youth crime and gang crime. First in child trafficking. First in gang membership. First in unemployment. And most of all, first in government dependency. So if you are part of the First Nations of Canada right now, I don't know how to break this to you, but you're in a seriously dysfunctional relationship with your government. Okay? Because the government runs almost all that stuff. And so when I hope that some of the people who are watching that video of my speech in Smoky Lake are First Nations or Aboriginal people, because these guys who are posing with Mr. Nenshi on the steps of the legislature. Have you ever seen an Indian in front of a bunch of Indians? I showed you the card, I got licensed, and I can say this. Wow. Well, let's talk about that for a second. Because this is important. What's going on there? Okay? So you got a bunch of guys there who are chiefs. You know the percentage of people in Alberta who live on First Nations reserves? 1%. Very good. Well, these people came prepared. Okay, it gets tougher though. Here's part 2. It's about 1%. Actually, I said that wrong. All of the Indigenous people in Alberta is about 1%. Okay? Of that 1%, how many do you think live on reserve? Somebody said half? Pretty close. 47%. That means that 53% of the 1% of people living in Alberta who are supposedly trying to stop the referendum don't even live on these reserves. So these chiefs who are standing there with Mr. Nenshi, even if they represented all of the Indians who live on reserve in Alberta, and they don't, they would still only represent less than half of 1% of all the people in Alberta. Now try to imagine if 6 of the richest guys in Alberta, like oil barons, or CNRL or the like, or maybe they sent over Jason Kenney. They can have them. Okay? Let's say they pick the 6 richest guys in Alberta and they send them over there to meet with the king. How did these Indians get to meet with the king anyway? Like, that's really hard. You gotta be like the Beatles to meet with the king, right? Okay, but even if they do represent all those Indians, that's still a fraction of 1%. But if all these rich guys went over there, what would you say? Oh, look at those rich fat cats over there, telling all of us hardworking blue collar. I shouldn't include myself in this because I don't have a blue collar. I have a blue sweater. But all the hard-working Albertans, they're telling us what to do. They're saying we can't have a referendum. So, again, here's a quiz. If the Indians had their land stolen, which is a lie, but if they did, who stole it?
The government.
The government?
King.
The king, thank you, the crown. So the king who stole their land, but all of us who have own land, be simple, we bought our land. Who did we buy our land from originally? The crown. We paid for it. Okay? These Indians are going over to see the king who stole their land. You see where I'm going with this? Dysfunctional. Okay? So why is this happening? Why are these lies being told? Well, because the people who are our enemies, and the enemies of good, hardworking Canadians and Albertans are this government in Ottawa. And they've been playing the same trick on us for a really long time. And it's a story old as time. There's a book, a great book, that was written over 1,000 years ago, I think, by a Japanese guy named Sun Tzu. It sounds like I'm sneezing. Sun Tzu. It's called The Art of War. Okay? And he says in there a number of things that have kind of fallen into common parlance, and people say them all the time. One of the things he says in that book is divide and conquer. Okay, so what does this government want to do? Well, it wants to make the Indian dependent, and it wants to use the Indian as a fool, as a useless idiot, as cannon fodder. So I'll give you an example. These Indians go over and you see them in the news, and they meet with the king, and they want to stop your referendum. Who are you mad at?
Yeah.
You're mad at these chiefs, right? Who sent them there? Who paid for the flights? Who paid for the caviar and bannock on the plane? Who got them? I'm guessing. I don't know what the menu is. Okay. Who got them a meeting with the king?
Carney.
Who else?
Yeah.
Did you know that Mark Carney was over visiting London at the very same time? Did you know, speaking of our Prime Minister, did you know he set a record?
Yes.
In his first year as our Prime Minister, he had 17 foreign trips. And some of the places like London and Paris and Rome, he went to multiple times. He also set a record in his first year for being the Prime Minister who sat in the House of Commons for the fewest days, especially in question period.
Lucky you
Okay.
did more damage if you stayed.
Wise words. Wise words. So what is the point of what I'm saying here? Well, we know that the relationship between our government and Alberta is really dysfunctional. And a lot of the people, like Mitch Sylvester, Jeff Rath, and others, do a really good job of talking about that. Okay? What I'm saying is the relationship between our Indigenous peoples is even worse. It's even more dysfunctional. And yet, we seem to be, the Indians, we're bound to this relationship. It's almost like a Stockholm syndrome, where we identify with their abuser, It's like battered province syndrome, right? Yeah. But they're holding on, for dear life because that's all they have. Almost like if they're lost at sea, holding on to a spar of wood, the last piece of wood from a ship that's gone down, and they're within sight of land, but they won't swim. So what I say to my brothers, my Indian brothers, Métis people here at St. Paul des Métis, is I say, let that go. We have a once in a lifetime, more than once in a lifetime, once in a century, once in the life of a country, to start over, okay? To renovate. You know what that word means, renovate? How many here have renovated your home? Okay? So what do you do when you renovate? You get rid of the stuff you don't like, you tear it out, you get rid of it. And you build something better that's newer, okay? That works better. Renovate just means to make new. And we have this incredible opportunity. And what I would like to say to you is, if you're not an Indigenous person, okay, try hard to see the Indian not as someone who is the other, not as an it, but as a thou, okay, as your brother or your sister, okay, because we're all living on God's land, and we're all sharing it. It's going to be here long after we're gone. What we do with it here and now is what matters. And He's going to judge us for how we do that. We can have a God-fearing land, a country with God at the head of the state, where He's supreme. We can have the rule of law that actually operates. We can trust our political representatives to actually be servant leaders as opposed to rulers who spend our money and steal it and treat us like fools. But we are going to be a much better society, a good society, if we live together under shared values. And this divisiveness that the federal government wants to cause between us, being the Indigenous peoples, and the quote-unquote, white colonists and our oppressors, that's a big lie. We have to let that go. Coming back to my land acknowledgement, the earth is the Lord's. This land that you're living on, Alberta, belongs to Him. It's ours. We are to be the stewards of it. And we have the incredible opportunity. Think of it. We can do it. We've got the will, we've got the referendum, we've come so far. But we've got to do it together. We can't let them divide us. Because the psyops, and the propaganda from here, don't think it's going to get easy just because we got the referendum. You're going to hear a lot of this propaganda. You're going to see it on television, on social media. You're going to see all of it. Try to convince you to set you against your Indian brothers. Don't believe it. This is our time, people. This is our opportunity. And we can have the greatest country in the world. We can have it right here in Alberta. But we've got to understand it belongs to all of us, and we have to share it. And it's incredible to be here in St. Paul, because St. Paul is actually an example, historical proof of what I'm talking about. Does anybody know the history of St. Paul? Okay, it was actually started as a Métis colony. And Father Lacombe, he tried very hard to make the colony work. But they did not participate with the other settlers. They kept them out. And guess what happened to the community when they did that? It failed. It failed. But when the settlers came in, and they were invited in to live with the Indians and the Métis communities, that's when the community flourished. And that's why you have a town here today that's going to be, I think, 90 years old this year, right? As a town. So you've proven it. This community's proven it. It can be done, but it can't be done if we believe all these lies and propaganda. So independence is for all of us. It doesn't distinguish based upon race or class or religion or language or any of that. And that's the beautiful thing. But coming back to my essential point, this land is not ours, right? It belongs to God. And if we understand that and we realize that, then we're going to have the right attitude about sharing it, and we're going to have the right attitude about building a country that will be, I think, the envy of the entire world. Thank you very much. Now I get to introduce the man of the hour, the man who's responsible for a lot of this work. I got to know Chris during COVID when he took a very brave stand. Whistle Stop, legendary now, Whistle Stop actually, Chris and I, we got to know each other now going back about 4 years, early days of APP. Remember Chris? And Chris used to really piss me off because the rest of us would get up and talk, and he would come up and he would just blow us all, everybody away, because he would laugh. He was the only guy who got a standing ovation at these things. So he's a hard act to follow, so I'm glad I got to go first. Chris Scott.
Well, thank you very much. I learned something today. So back then, at those meetings, I thought everyone was standing up to leave when I arrived. And I was always confused why they didn't. I thought maybe someone just closed the door, but now I get it. So that's very, very humbling. I appreciate it. Well, thank you all for coming, and especially those of you that have never been to an event like this before. And especially if there's any of you who are here because you disagree with the idea of an independent Alberta. I do realize that not everybody agrees with what me and Leighton and Sheane and some of the other speakers that put these events on say. I understand that some of our views are controversial. That's why I lured you here with pierogies.
Hey, no cinnamon buns though, Chris.
Listen, lady. No, the idea is to get back to the human thing that we used to do before COVID. Do you remember that? We used to get together at town halls, listen to each other's opinions. We certainly didn't stop talking to our neighbors because they voted in a different party than what we would vote. I mean, things were different back then, and I think that the biggest part of the reason, if not the reason, is that we used to talk face to face to each other. We used to spend more time being human beings, and we don't do that very much now, right? A lot of our time is spent on social media. There's people watching on social media right now that I don't get to talk face to face with. And so we've lost some of that human connection that lets us overcome our differences. And now we have this divide that it's almost insurmountable, uncrossable, there's no bridge. So getting people in a room together, especially people who disagree and want to talk things out, is really important. Now, as an Albertan, I'm sure that you may feel, as I do, that it is even more important than ever to start having these discussions and start talking to each other face to face like human beings. Because in a few short months, we're going to be asked a question, right? And it's going to be a really heavy question, a really important question. It's going to change the future of Alberta forever, one way or the other. And the question is, or something similar to, do you agree that Alberta should cease to be a province within Canada and become an independent state? Not a united state, but an independent state as an independent nation, sovereign. That's the question. So if you're going to be asked a question, if you're going to take a test, what do you have to do before you take that test? You have to study, because if you're confused, you will lose. And right now, I've realized, actually no, not right now, the minute I started paying attention to what was going on around me, and this was only recently, 2020, when the government was trying to kill us. Or, keep us safe, whatever. I only really started getting involved then because I was put in a position, like that scared animal backed into a corner where I had to either fight or flee. And I chose fight because I'm Irish and I don't think they know how to spell flee. So we have this question coming up. We're going to take this test, and the test is going to be regarding Alberta's future. You're an Albertan, regarding your future, and your kids' future, and your grandchildren's futures. I can't think of a question that has a more impactful consequence than this question. Except for the, will you marry me, or will you have my baby, that kind of thing. Those obviously affect our kids and grandchildren as well. But short of that, this is big. And if you take the time and go look on social media at what people are saying about this conversation, it is depressing. Absolutely depressing. Not because the situation depresses me or the conversation depresses me, but because the lack of knowledge on these subjects that we have as Albertans is astounding. And I am 100% guilty of this as well, because I got to a point where I was lying in jail because I held a protest on my own land peacefully. And I started thinking, man, I really don't know what the laws are. I don't even know what the Constitution says. Does it say anything? Is it even real? Who am I as a Canadian? Who am I as an Albertan? What do rights mean? I didn't know the answer to any of those things. How do we elect someone? I didn't know how we did that. I knew we went to a place and chose a name that sounded cool, or a guy that had nice hair, and we put a check mark or an X beside their name or whatever, and went on with our lives. But short of that, I didn't know anything else. And I've been a voting age for more than 1 year. How depressing is it that a over 20-year-old man doesn't know how the electoral process or civics works in a country where he votes on these policies, right? That's why we're in this situation right now, is because many of us, and myself included, I'm 100% guilty of this, we spend our time doing the things that we wanted to do, the things that interested us, We were distracted by the bread and circuses that were pummeled at us from the time we were children watching cartoons on Saturday morning, until we were racing home from work to watch Friends on TV or something like that. We just didn't pay attention. So as I think about this question that's coming up, I start thinking, man, we really haven't studied for this test. And it shows on social media. I see stuff all the time, and I actually hang my head and almost weep when I read what people are writing about this topic. Some people, they have no idea what the law is. They've never read the Constitution. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it means. They don't know where it came from. They don't know its implications on them. But they say things like, I am Canadian and always will be. Okay, why? Why is that? Do you like the deal we have right now? If we were an independent nation right now, and we were asked to join Confederation under the current terms, would you? Well, do you know what the terms are? Right? These are big questions. And so I decided, hey, you know what? We need to go to every corner of Alberta and try and have these conversations and clear the air on some of these things and get the facts to people so that they aren't confused. So that when they go to the poll in October and check yes or no, they aren't confused and they don't lose. We don't want to lose this. This is a big deal. Do you know how big of a deal this is? Do you know how many countries, how many regions, how many peoples got an opportunity to ask a question like this, or have the question asked of them by their government with the intention of respecting the will of the people? Do you know how many places got that opportunity? Like none. Like zero. This is I believe this is a first. Actually, no, you know what? Sweden and Norway, they did that. It was peaceful. They just had a referendum. I think there's a couple others. But the majority of issues like this, the majority of times that there was a change of jurisdiction or a region split off or its parent company became sovereign, the price that they paid, the sacrifice they made, was usually their sons, their daughters, and their blood. That's the reality of this. Our neighbors to the south, the Americans, it's their 250th anniversary of being an independent nation this year. 250 years. And to earn that, to gain that opportunity to be free and chart their own course, they had to fight a horribly bloody and brutal war in a time of no anesthetic, no antibiotics, where people literally died by rotting in a bed after they're wounded on the battlefield, right? And here we are in Alberta. All we have to do is maybe decide we're not going to watch TV that night, or maybe we're not going to go to a hockey game. And by the way, Danielle, my good friend, please do something to make sure that people can't be distracted by a freaking hockey game during referendum. Like maybe we should have a no hockey games on that day. Every Albertan needs to get out and vote and speak their mind in the privacy of the ballot box. We have that opportunity, and I can't stress enough how important it is and how grateful I am to live in a country in which I can do that. All other things aside, taxes and Brookfield and Trudeau and all of these things that piss us off as Albertans, all that aside, we live in a country where we can express our will through democratic means, for example, a referendum, and we will be respected. Or we're supposed to be, anyway. Is that speaker ringing? Okay, just my ears. And I'm very grateful for that. That's what Canada is at its core. It's respecting the will of the people. That's what democracy does. So because of that, because of this great opportunity we have, it would serve us very well to start getting educated on these things, right? How many people in this room have seen something on Facebook where it said, somebody from another province, for that matter, is saying, no, Alberta, you can't leave because insert stupid thing here, right? We've all seen it. Now that's annoying. It's really annoying to watch brain dead boat. Am I allowed to talk about that?
Yes.
To watch
Intellectually impaired.
entrepreneurial people read from a teleprompter what ChatGPT is telling them about how Alberta can or cannot do something. It's worse when I see Albertans doing it. When an Albertan chimes up on Facebook page and says, We can never leave because Canada owns the oil. I'm like, oh my freaking goodness. Like, crack a history book.
Yeah.
Read some legislation. Get to know, even who you are here in this country and this province, what the province's rights and jurisdiction is, and what it all means before you say that. Because if people like that go into a question of the significance that's coming in October, and they answer based on their misconceptions and ignorance of the facts, we will lose. And it will be terrible. It'll be terrible. Absolutely terrible. I almost feel like it's when you're watching your kid, and I am sorry, Mom, by the way. You're watching your kids do something completely stupid and brain dead. And you know it, because you've done it before, right? Like touching the stove or something like that. Or taking out a big loan to buy a car that you can't really afford. You know it's bad. You know they're ignorant of the facts. They don't have all the knowledge they need to make that decision. And you can't stop them, and they go and make the decision, and you watch it unfold exactly how you know it's going to go. That's what it's like when I see these people talking about Alberta and why we can't leave.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something about Alberta and leaving. Number one, it's necessary. It is 100% necessary. Right now, you've heard from Sheane, you've heard from Leighton, I'm sure you've heard lots of other speakers talk about some of the problems and the inequities we have in Confederation. Confederation isn't broken, by the way. And this is the point of contention I have with Premier Smith. She wants to fix things and stay within Canada. And newsflash, folks, things aren't broken. This is the way it was intended to be. Read the Alberta Act, read the Saskatchewan Act, read the Constitution, read a little bit of history, read Clifford Sifton, Volume 2, A Lonely Eminence, and read his words, what Sheane described. We and all Canadian patriots desire the great trade of the prairies go to benefit us in the East, basically. It is not broken. This was intentional. Alberta was never meant to fulfill its destiny and become the economic or social or any engine of Canada. Engine, not engine. Just for Facebook clarity.
I'm offended.
Mission accomplished. We were never meant to be like that. That's why things are the way they are. That's why at 8, what time was the election called, folks?
8:09.
8:09. What time did the polls close? In Alberta, what time did the polls close? 8 o'clock. Our ballot boxes weren't even open and the election was called and we elected another Liberal government after 15 years of Liberal tyranny and destruction to the people of Alberta. It's meant to be that way. We are not meant to be able to influence the path that Canada's on because Canada, upper or eastern and central Canada, does not consider us part of Canada. If it did, they wouldn't strand our resources. They wouldn't impose legislation that goes against our values. They wouldn't tell our farmers that they couldn't farm the way they've been doing for hundreds of years because whatever reason. They wouldn't do those things. If we were a united confederation, equal and moving to prosperity together, those things wouldn't happen. We wouldn't have to sell our wheat to the wheat board so that Canada can take its cut before we sell it to somebody else. We wouldn't ever be told that you can only produce so much oil and you're only allowed to have so much money. Does that sound like a country that's functioning as a partnership?
No.
It's not. And it's meant to be that way. So for Alberta to achieve the things we could achieve, to live the way we want to live, to pursue the values and principles that are in our hearts here in Alberta, it is necessary for us to become sovereign. There is no other way. And it is inevitable. And you know why it's inevitable? Because the federal government and the federalists will not stop doing the things they do that expose these things. How many people in this room 6 years ago would have come to a meeting like this about getting out of Canada?
Oh, I would have.
Roughly, I would say, between about a third. I wouldn't have either. Do you know why? It wasn't bad enough yet. They hadn't exposed their hand enough yet. I didn't have the knowledge of the history of this country and what it means to make an informed decision. So if we had had a referendum back then, it would have been fruitless. Almost like the equalization referendum that we had, right? So here we are in 2026. The 250th anniversary of the freest country on earth, the longest lasting experiment in freedom that built Western democracy, Western civilization, the United States. Alberta's 121st year of being a legislated entity. And we're going to be asked this question. How did that make you feel when you realized that Albertans didn't actually get to negotiate the terms of entering Confederation? BC did. Newfoundland did in 1949. Everybody but Alberta and Saskatchewan got to negotiate their entrance into Confederation. That's why they have a better deal. That's why they have better representation in the Senate. That's why they have better representation in the House of Commons. That's why when Alberta works and we create value, some of that value goes over there to them, because they negotiated those things. Alberta has never, ever negotiated from a position of strength. As a matter of fact, we've never negotiated at all. And that's why Alberta independence is necessary and inevitable, because at some point, a region that was created like that has to grow up and do things on their own. Maybe in 1905 it was appropriate that we were legislated into existence because we were busy living and trying to survive Alberta winters. We're past that. We can self-govern. We can self-determine. We can decide what to do with our resources and those types of things. We don't need somebody 4,000 kilometers away telling us to do it anymore. And here we go, October. Do you agree that Alberta should cease to be a province in Canada and become an independent state? I'm going to vote. Okay, fine. So I still have to convince you. I get it. I'm going to vote yes. I'm going to vote yes in that referendum. I want Alberta to self-determine. Does that mean that I hate Canada? Absolutely not. I love this country. The number one reason why I love Canada is because Canada affords us the opportunity to do this. That's why. Yeah. I love Canadians. I drove all across this country in a vehicle that had no business driving that far. And I met people from every province. And they are the people that occupy this land are fantastic human beings. They all believe that Canada is this beacon of freedom and prosperity that the world looks up to. I don't believe that anymore, and neither do most of them. What we believed Canada was does not exist. It doesn't. And we've learned that. If we've learned nothing else in the last 6 years, we have learned that Canada is not the free country that we believed it once was. If the government can take your rights away whenever they want, and there's no accountability, you are not free. Take it from a guy who's been arrested for protesting, hidden. I've attended illegal church services in Canada. Illegal church services, because if we had been caught, we would have been fined or jailed. I've had meetings like this with my friend Leighton over there, where we had to do it under the cover of darkness, hiding in the shop in Nisku, meeting for political purposes, because if we had been discovered, we would have been fined or jailed. Like, this is Canada, right? I want the old Canada back. I want the Canada that I believed existed when I was 5, 6 years old. That's what I want. And if you want that Canada as well, the only way you're going to see it is if Alberta stands up and says enough. And we give the rest of this country the intestinal fortitude they need to stand up as well. We can be leaders for the first time in history, and what leaders we will be. So I would encourage you tonight, as we go into the question and answer period, which is supposed to be the longest, but somehow nobody gave me a timer, so I think I'm way over. I want you to, if you have questions, or more importantly, if you have objections, please tell us. Ask me. Like, Chris, we cannot become independent because the federal government gives us health transfers, and if they don't give us those, how are we going to pay for hospitals? Please, somebody ask me that. If you have an objection, we want to hear it. But I will tell you this right now, and I'll tell you this out there, internet people. Every single objection that I've heard for Alberta independence can be turned around into a reason why we must become independent. Every single one. There isn't one yet. Pardon me. There is actually. The emotional ones. Yeah. The arguments that are the most difficult to overcome are the emotional ones. You know, the guys that tell me that I should die because I'm a traitor. Like, it's kind of hard to have a conversation with them when they want to shoot me, right? But, you know, this is, your job is going to be talking to those people who are in your circles of trust already that have the emotional arguments against leaving. That's up to you. I can't do it. They don't give a crap what I say, but they love you. You might be able to reach them. You can plant those seeds, wait for the next time the federal government is the best salesperson for Alberta independence, and maybe that seed will blossom, right? You deal with the emotional stuff. We'll help you with the factual stuff, the evidence, the knowledge that you need to talk about these things. Ask the questions and we'll do it together. But the most important thing is that we start talking Alberta, because when we stop talking,
Goes away.
bad things happen. So let's talk Alberta.
Yep.